call on the Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. In an effort to hide from his failures, the Prime Minister spent this week arguing about an ancient relic that only a tiny minority of the British public have any interest in. Mr Speaker, that's enough about the Tory party. In 2019, they all promised the country that they would control immigration, numbers will come down, the British people will be in control. How's it going?
Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, let me be crystal clear. The levels of migration are far too high, and I'm determined to bring them back down to sustainable levels. That's why we've asked the Migration Advisory Council to review certain elements of the system. We're reviewing those findings and we'll bring forward next steps. But earlier this year, we announced the toughest action ever taken to reduce legal migration. The effects of that action are yet to be felt, but will impact 150,000 student dependents, and forecasts show that migration is likely to drop as a result. But all we've heard up until this moment from the Honourable Gentleman on this topic is a secret backroom deal with the EU that would see an additional 100,000 migrants here every year.
Mr Speaker, never mind the British Museum, it's the Prime Minister who's obviously lost his marbles. Mr Speaker, the Greek Prime Minister came to London to meet him, a fellow NATO member, an economic ally, one of our most important partners in tackling illegal immigration. But instead of using that meeting to discuss those serious issues, he tried to humiliate him and cancelled at the last minute. Why such small politics, Prime Minister?
Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, of course, we're always happy to discuss important topics of substance with our allies, like tackling illegal migration or indeed strengthening our security. But when it was clear that the purpose of a meeting was not to discuss substantive issues for the future, but rather to grandstand and relitigate issues of the past, it wasn't appropriate. But furthermore, when specific commitments and specific assurances on that topic were made to this country and then were broken, it may seem alien to him, but my view is when people make commitments, they should keep them.
Mr Speaker, I discussed with the Greek Prime Minister the economy, security, immigration. I also told him we wouldn't change the law regarding the marbles. It's not that difficult, Prime Minister. The reality is simple. He has no plan on boat crossings, and migration is at a record high. His policy is that companies can pay workers from abroad 20% less than British workers. That has contributed to those record-high immigration levels, hasn't it?
Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, he talks about the boat crossings. He's failed to notice illegal boat crossings are down by a third this year, Mr Speaker, thanks to every one of the actions that we've taken that he opposed every single time they were raised. But look, Mr Speaker, no one will be surprised that he's backing an EU country over Britain. Just this last week he was asked, he was asked which song best sums up the Labour Party. What did he come up with? Well, Mr Speaker, he showed his true colours and chose Ode to Joy, literally the anthem of the European Union. And he will back Brussels over Britain every single time.
So let me get this straight. The Prime Minister is now saying that meeting the Prime Minister of Greece is somehow supporting the EU instead of discussing serious issues. He's just got dug further into that hole that he's made for himself. And ever, rather than deal with the facts, he's prosecuting his one-man war on reality. And that reality is stuck. Under this government, a bricklayer from overseas can be paid £2,500 less than somebody who's already here. A plasterer, £3,000 less. An engineer, £6,000 less. The list goes on. It's absurd. Labour would scrap his perverse wage-cutting policy. Why won't he?
Mr. Speaker, as I said, we have taken significant measures and will bring forward more. And indeed, as the ONS themselves said, more recent estimates indicate a slowing of immigration as a result of the things that we're doing. But I am surprised, Mr. Speaker, to hear him now taking this new position, because I've got a quote here from a pushy young shadow immigration minister who said, and I directly quote this person, he told this House that limits on skilled migrants are, and I quote, a form of economic vandalism. Who could possibly have taken such a bizarre position to only then U-turn? It will come as no surprise to anybody that it was him.
Mr. Speaker, there's only one party that's lost control of the borders, and they're sitting right there. And this is a government not just in turmoil, in open revolt. The immigration minister thinks the Prime Minister is failing because apparently nobody will listen to his secret plan. The former Home Secretary thinks he's failing because of his magical thinking. The current Home Secretary thinks he's failing. He even took time out of his busy schedule insulting people in the North East to admit he agrees with Labour. The Prime Minister seems to be the only person on the Tory benches without his own personal immigration plan. Clearly, his own side don't have any faith in him. Why should the public?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, it's really a bit rich to hear about this from someone who described all immigration law as racist, who literally said it was a mistake to control immigration. We have taken steps and we will take further steps, which is why recent estimates of immigration show that it's slowing. It's why next year the immigration health surcharge will increase by over 2/3. It's why immigration fees are going up by up to 35%. But, Mr. Speaker, one of his own members of his front bench said that having a target isn't sensible. Right? It's no surprise, Mr. Speaker, to have people like this, because this is the person, Mr. Speaker, while we're taking all these measures that he opposed, this is the person who stood on a platform and promised to defend free movement.
On their watch, migration has just trebled and he's giving the House a lecture about targets. He's lost in la-la land. There can be few experiences more haunting for the members opposite than hearing this Prime Minister claim that he's going to sort out a problem. First, he said he'd get the NHS waiting list down. They went up. Unabashed by that, he said he'd get control of immigration. It's gone up. Following that experience, he turned his hand to bringing taxes down. And, would you believe it, the tax burden is now going to be higher than ever. It is ironic that he's suddenly taken such a keen interest in Greek culture when he's clearly become the man with the reverse Midas touch. Everything he touches turns to... maybe the Home Secretary could help me out here. Rubbish. So will the Prime Minister do the country a favour? We'll have to check the tape again, Mr. Speaker, I think. So will the Prime Minister do the country a favour, warn us what he's planning next, so we can prepare ourselves for the disaster that will inevitably follow?
Mr. Speaker, at the beginning of the year, we said, Mr. Speaker...
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, at the beginning of the year, we said we would halve inflation, and this government has delivered, easing the burden on the cost of living for families everywhere. But we know his plans, Mr. Speaker, all the way through that. What did he do? Back inflationary pay rises. He talked about welfare, no controls for welfare, and borrowing £28 billion a year that would just make the situation worse. He mentioned tax, Mr. Speaker. Just this past week, we've delivered the biggest tax cuts since the 1980s for millions of people and businesses, increased pensions and benefits, and this week secured £30 billion of new investment for this country. So he can keep trying, Mr. Speaker, to talk...
Can I just say to the Shadow Foreign Secretary... order! just a little bit quieter, please. I want to hear.